and Community Council survey responses scheduled today, August 16, 2024, from 1 to 2. We're starting a little bit late, 1:06. So we'll start with introductions. Ms. Bronga.
Karen Bronga.
Randy Solt.
Zach Johnson. Mark Littlefield.
Anna Brawley.
Meg Zalatel.
Christopher Constant.
Cameron Perez Verdia.
Scott Myers.
Thank you. And we're also joined by Ona Brous, the acting OMB director, and our attorneys, and a whole bunch of people in the room. And so today we are having a conversation to discuss the capital improvement project budget and community council survey response process, which, since I have been on this assembly, or even before when I was serving in the community council, it has been broken. It's just never really been fixed to the satisfaction of anyone involved with the process, except maybe the people who behind the scenes will add their projects to community council survey lists. The community council has never had any input on, and even interestingly, projects from all across town that have nothing to do with the community council, they show up on their CIP lists. And so what we're going to do today is kind of review our current, a little background, a review of current known requests, a discussion of process, discussion of projects, and a discussion of next steps, all in no time. Procedurally, I welcome everybody. We've done the roll call. Is there anyone on the phone? No, I believe we'll be joined by some folks late, possibly. The purpose of the work session is to learn from project sponsors and experts in the field, as well as give assembly members an opportunity to ask questions and learn more about legislation and topics in front of us, not a place to debate. Text me if you want to get in the queue. This is the first of several meetings for the assembly to prepare our priorities for the municipal capital funding requests for 2025. Today we'll look at things from the 10,000-foot view, but very soon we'll get into the nitty-gritty details when we review the administration's proposal at a work session in early September on the 120-day memo. Before we begin, I want to provide some background on the process. Some newer members, you've probably seen it, and it might be starting to make sense. We have our capital improvement plan, which is our 6-year outlook of bonds, state and federal and private grants, and really projects that we are programming into construction. So that 6-year outlook is the way we can space the work out, find the funding for the projects, and get projects done with the staff that we have. Then we have the capital improvement budget, which are the specifics from the plan for the year ahead in the budget. And so you have the capital improvement plan, 6 years, capital improvement budget this year. And then you have capital priorities in the legislative program, bonds, and that appear on the April ballot come out of the CIB. So in order to have projects move forward onto bonds, generally speaking, they need to be part of the capital improvement budget, which is the 1-year specific plan. Now, members can propose amendments to the capital improvement budget at any time. That's what our legislative process is for. It's generally not done at any time. It's generally done in the budgeting season or possibly around Q1. But just to remind everybody, members, we do have the right as members to propose amendments to the legislative program, the CIB, et cetera. We just, for efficiency's sake, try to keep it organized around the calendar. It's been the Assembly's goal for several years to consider these budgets earlier in the year to allow more community input and dialogue on the community's capital priorities. And so I thank OMB and staff from the administration for your work to prepare this information earlier in the year. I think this came to a head a couple years ago when new members wanted to make park proposals, and effectively we crashed into the wall of time and we're told, no, you can't make any changes because bond council hasn't seen it and you're SOL. And members just really didn't like to hear that when the decision-making authority was taken out of the hands of the decision makers by putting the clock in such a way that there was no option. And we ended up with a terribly small parks bond and a quite interesting, arcane, almost magical parliamentary process that created a special election within the regular election and kind of got our needs met, got our priorities met, but did it in an extraordinary way as opposed to in an orderly way. And so the purpose of this conversation is to ensure that there's ample time in the process for the community and for members to have a say, and the body as a whole to have a say in the creation of the CIB and the items that move on to the ballot for the voters in the spring. So the goals are to provide a big picture outlook, to help assembly members dig into the priorities, to give administration an opportunity to hear the preferred direction and projects the assembly is kind of chewing on, so they can help craft the CIB that's more likely to pass the assembly without any extraordinary kind of leaps at the last minute. And I think that we have exceptional support now within the administration to get a budget done the first time that's representative, as opposed to at the last minute. After this work session, there'll be a work session early September on the 120-day memo. I think we received that like the 1st of September, right? 120 days before the beginning of the year, where we can review specifics put forward by the administration, and we get the first round of vetting and public dialogue to hone in on the projects that are finalized with the budget vote in late November. So, as we roll towards the end of the month, warning to everybody, new and old, the budget season is officially beginning, and this is like our first official foray into it. And this is one of our biggest duties as members of this body, is to ensure that the budget that passes is efficient, that it is funded, that it is in alignment with the values the municipality is trying to implement. So the benefits of taking the time to start now on the 2025 capital budget priorities are that it creates more open and transparent communication broadly with the community. It provides more opportunity for back and forth conversation and dialogue between the assembly and the administration before any preliminary or final packages are solidified. And it just really makes this dialogue more public. The vetting of projects are in the open and ensures that the bond packages and legislative requests are more thought out and have greater buy-in by the community. So I think the first step now is to pivot to the background document. I wish there was someone to walk us through this, because I don't want to talk at you for this whole work session. But over the past year, we've been working together to develop a more transparent, efficient process for vetting projects entering the municipality CIB and CIP, which were used to develop the legislative program, which developed capital requests to the state legislature and bond measures. The goal is the public municipal departments and the assembly to have time to meaningfully review and develop final products. Timeline and process. In August, we're beginning, this is our first work session, look at big picture outlook, assembly members to understand the priorities of the districts, give the administration an opportunity to hear our priorities. Next month is to review the 120-day memo. Then in February, project management and engineering typically meets to rank their projects for the year. There's a question on the page there. Can an assembly staff member be included in this process? April, assembly staff works with members to send communications to community councils when the annual CIP survey is released. May, June, assembly work session to review the success, failure of bonds and results of the legislative session with the goal of debriefing on recent success and failures to determine which projects didn't get funding that need to be put back in, and remind members to confirm if their community councils responded to the CIP survey, which is typically due in June. Some of the kind of concerns and questions: can the community council survey be moved to a fall cycle so it's ready when administration starts their project review? And so that when the legislature goes to Juneau, projects are fresh and updated. The councils have met, they've heard from their councils. So projects that get into the CAPSA system and the state capital budget have come through an efficient process instead of what we have now. And can we generate on a citywide survey opportunity so members who don't care to affiliate with community councils for whatever reason can have a place to have their feedback heard? There are a lot of reasons why members of the community don't avail themselves of the community council system. And so that's one kind of very low-hanging fruit piece, I think. And it would be ironic then that it gets circulated through the community council's system for its broad output, but the idea is to allow all the other people a voice. Others, to improve community council survey process to obtain an online program that's easier for everyone to use. Communications to community councils throughout the year to prompt them to develop their lists in time for the survey. Create more categories in the survey, such as top 5 major projects over, top 5 small projects under, 500,000. Allow them to input their citywide priorities if there are projects outside of their districts. And this one is important. Give them a way to remove projects from their list. There's nothing more frustrating than being at the Fairview Community Council, asking for Fairview projects and having a South Anchorage Sports Park show up on your CIP list from nowhere and listed as a priority. Like, how does this happen and why? And there's no way to remove it. It's just there. And it's offensive to those who are doing that work. Additional resources, you have the CIB and CIP on the OMB website, Community Council survey, the development process listed, and the topic of the 2023 work session, April 21, August 25, and September 8th. So, Ms. Salatel.
Thanks. So I have a real functional question. Is there some way, and where would it fit in the timeline, to create new bond categories? I'm particularly interested, after we had the CASA bond and the cemeteries bond, of having those be standalone bond categories because they're not one and dones. I believe CASA is multiple projects. Cemetery could be multiple years of funding in order to make those go forward. But I wouldn't want to use up the space we traditionally have in the parks bond, or push those projects, but let those be standalone. So that's my question, is when we find that there are these multi-year standalone opportunities that the voters have said, particularly with CASA, that they want to see, how can we make it its own bond category? And then also, once it is, I think we can then request a CIP from them, a capital improvement project list over a number of years, so we can see what's being prioritized and we can adopt it formally. Because I think getting them last minute or getting them as one-offs but not put in the broader picture has us kind of forced to make some choices that are difficult.
Through the chair to Member Zalatel. As of right now, I can't speak to whether or not there are limitations on the accessibility of creating bond categories, but I can check on that and see what the response is. I would say that, historically, there has not been a limitation on being able to do that. It is the priority of the administration, and however the assembly adopts their process that creates the allowance of those. So through the collaborative process of all of this, that would make sense to be a conversation if it's of interest to both the administration and the assembly.
Thanks. And I think it goes beyond the one-off of us doing a standalone bond. It's really to make sure that there's a CIP, a program attached to something that's going to be multi-year, instead of just the fact that a bond proposition might be brought forward for cemeteries and we want it to stand alone. Because I think the budgeting process and kind of seeing prospectively can make voters more comfortable with what we're doing, for making a X dollar investment in cemeteries this year and this much the next year and this much the next year, right? And we can articulate how that's going to roll out.
Through the chair to Member Zalatel, is what you're asking about maybe a larger deferred maintenance list for the municipality and the things that need to be either cared for, maintained, or dealt with as we know into the future?
That would be helpful. I think that that's where the cemeteries issue in particular pops up. But the mechanism we have right now is either to do a one-off standalone or to shove it in the parks bond.
Hannah.
Thanks. So I'm going to put some kind of big questions or issues on the table, things that are on my mind, not with the idea that we solve them today or come up with the answers, but thinking about especially kind of the pipeline from, getting these projects in, having a 6-year list of projects, and then how that actually moves down into the bonds, and then what we ask the state. Because I think, as we know, there is not the capital budget that there used to be. And of course, we have the additional dynamic now of what actually gets vetoed versus what goes in the budget. But setting some of those specific things aside, I think we need to be more targeted about what we are asking the state, because I do not find it acceptable that we simply submit all of the entire list in CAPSIS and say, here you go, and let legislators pick. I understand why that's been done in the past, but I think it is worth asking, is that really effective in an environment where we have very much less money than when that whole system was created? So that's one thing. And again, thinking ahead to the legislative program and recognizing that there is value and need for each legislator in each district, just like it is in our districts, to have those projects. But what happens is sometimes it feels scattershot, or then, the things in certain districts get vetoed, as we saw this past cycle. And also the other thing I'm asking for is more coordination about what the city's priorities are. And then when we all go down to Juneau, that we coordinate about that, because it was a difficult year to go down there and advocate because we were not given a list. And I will acknowledge some of that are things that are prior administration, right? But also not helpful when I literally cannot answer the question to our lobbyist, what are our priorities? What on this list are our priorities? So I just want to name those. And I know those are things we can fix. But as we talk about the community side and what goes in, we also have to think about how this goes out and how it's used on the other side. And then the other thing I'll say, and then I'll stop talking for a while, is we do have a really big deferred maintenance backlog. And so I think, again, the mode of what are the nice things that we want to build, we have to balance that against what is the financial reality that we're living in right now. And some of these things are not going to be new projects. They're not going to be as visible, and they are absolutely things that we need to be getting support for, whether it's bonds or state. So I'm thinking about that from my district too. How much am I thinking about things that do make our community nicer, that enhance, that are new things? And then how much of it is it literally just asking, we need to repave every road in Sand Lake, right? I mean, so I'm trying to balance where I'm going to be advocating there, and we'll be working with the community on that. But I just wanted to name, because those are some big things that I think are features of a process that we continue to use that does not meet the conditions that we're in now. Thanks.
Through the chair to Member Brawley, I think I understand all of the points that you were making there, and particularly the CAPSIS limitations and how those programs are loaded into the legislature's process. And from my work experience, I know that those things can be limited and prioritized specifically by the submitter. So the municipality can feed those into the CAPSIS system based on the legislative program and based on the administration priorities. So all of those things, to my knowledge, are possible.
So I don't see anyone in the queue. I'll put myself in there. So you're new, but you've been around. So you saw some of what happened last year. And there was one issue last year that really divided the members, and I'm hoping this year we can avoid that. And that's the CASA bond conversation. And what was missing last year was any kind of process that included members outside of the LRSAs who would be paying for those projects in large part. And so what I'm hoping is that somehow the administration, as it moves through this process, can convene a working group with residents from the hillside and with residents from down here who all can be part of a conversation about what are priorities and how we select and what's a proper scale of the CASA program. Because generally speaking, the voters do support it, but it can't be unfair and unequitable. And it certainly can't just be a replacement project for LRSA responsibilities. It has to be hewed into access to the parks. And so I'm hopeful you have that on your dashboard. It's probably a pain in the butt, but it would be very valuable in heading off conflict by building kind of unified process and perspective.
I think it's fair for me to say that we're aware of some of the challenges related with the CASA bond and have had internal conversations about how that looks going forward, and stay tuned, I suppose.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I just want to mark it on the table so I know we had that talk so that it's no surprise when we get to the later part of the year. Karen.
I'm just going to respond to that, Chair, that we have a meeting scheduled with the mayor to discuss the CASA, and we are working on a survey that will be distributed citywide. So there'll be input from the entire bowl as well as the hillside on projects that make accessibility to Chugach better for them.
Yeah, that's it's very helpful, and getting that work aligned with the process is super important because the time is coming. The time is definitely coming. So, okay, anyone else on this? So I'm not sure. I didn't really spend time briefing on how we were going to go through this process, but we do have the basically the CIB for 2024, which is last year's projects, or the projects that passed this year or not.
I have a general question.
Go ahead, Meg.
I don't know if this is for you, Ona, or if this is one to take back, but as we have our bond projects, are any workforce issues delaying the implementation, right? Are we at all behind schedule? I think that's an important analysis for us to do, or context for us to have as we think about what new projects we're hoping to see, or why we might not be seeing a project we had an expectation was going to move forward. And I hadn't thought about that issue, but it would make sense if we're having workforce issues, particularly for ones that the municipal workforce is doing and they're not contracted out.
Through the chair to member Zalatel, I'm assuming you mean the projects that have either been partially funded as they move forward? Okay, yes.
So I don't have anyone in the queue, no burning conversation. So I'm going to also talk briefly about, I think you understand the conversation when we talk about trying to change the timeline on the CIP and figure out a way to conclude the surveys as we roll into the budget process, as opposed to in that springtime when the legislature's concluding and we're looking at anyhow. So the idea is to figure out in the fall how we can be talking about the next year's projects so that when we budget, we know we're all sharing the same sheet of music. And maybe the CIP is supposed to do that, but the reports from the councils, but it just doesn't seem to work.
I think it's safe to say that the capital process has been different over the last few years than it has been in the past. I think there are a handful of requests from membership that can be achieved in the current process if the current process is more robust than it has been recently. We've had internal conversations about that too. PM&E and Public Works and the mayor's office and OMB are all having conversations about what that can look like and how to adjust what we currently do to incorporate some of the requests that membership has made, because I believe some of them are pretty easy. As far as the timing goes, one of the challenges associated with it is the potential for public perception of the funding of the projects to be immediate based on community council survey responses from the same month, essentially. So we have to figure out how the timing of that works and what the best option for it is. But I'm not aware of any significant challenges as to changing the process to make it more accessible.
Yeah, I recently had a community council reach out to me and their discussion was along the lines of, what has the muni done from our list? Like pretty heavy hand on the desk. And it's like, well, nothing. And that, I mean, there's an irrational expectation that the community council puts their list forward and those projects get funded. It's not rational, but it's, in the past, there was state money from heaven.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that can be easily resolved is the information flow. You know, letting people know what is happening, what is possible, what has happened, and keeping that detail engaged with community councils and the general public is important. Because one of the things that happens is people say nothing has happened, but maybe something has, they just aren't aware of it. And so making sure that everybody's on the same page with the same information is important.
Karen?
The timeline thing, I know is in the initial stages, but it is concerning to me, having been involved in the community councils for a long time. We always had new officers, it seems like in the fall, that were just trying to figure out how to run a meeting and get their community council going and to do the survey at a different time, maybe when they're not even up to date. That just, I mean, when they're just learning what they're doing is concerning to me. But I do like the idea. It's just, it's really hard with new people. And it always seemed to me, and I think all of you have been involved in community councils, but it just was that last thing you got done, and then it was summer. And you worked hard to put that list together, but then you just had a break. But in the fall, everything seems like it's going fast. So
it's interesting. Megan and I are chatting this. Our councils all do their elections in the spring.
Oh, really?
And then, so the CIP process rolls right over their elections. And so it's funny, not all councils are on the same calendar. Yeah. And there's really never a good time for a volunteer group to have a deadline, because volunteer groups are like, wait, what? Deadline? And it's tricky. And then the fact that the feedback loop is broken is why are we doing this? Is the question that often arises. I'm sorry I don't have a really like vibrant plan for this. First, we'll have Anna and then Meg.
Yeah, thanks. I think, so one thing we talked about a few months ago, and I know that was before you were in this role, was really more logistical or practical issues with the website. And I know that's not really our job to debrief all those right now, but I know that is a barrier for folks even who are experienced and have been submitting lists for a long time. And then also there is the open question of how does anybody who's not in a community council provide input, particularly if there are situations where council members oppose a project, and I can think of a couple that I'm aware of, and not taking a side, but just that happens. And so I'm wondering kind of what is the opportunity within that software system that I know lives with OMB, and does that have to be part of the conversation? Are we looking at a different system, or will it take time to redesign it, or kind of, I just don't have a good sense of what it even is, and I know it has flaws, so just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Through the chair to Member Brawley, I can't speak to the exact details of the system that we use. I have not used it yet, so I'll learn with you in that. But to answer the question about what the opportunities are for other input outside of the community council process, I would contend that is what this body is for, and that the points of contact, you are points of contact for every issue within the municipality. That doesn't mean you're the only way that information can come back, but it's not that it doesn't exist. I think it's that the engagement in the process has been a little lacking. And to the calendaring issue of the varying community councils, the challenge in that is that the municipality has the ultimate deadline. And so building the budgets around what is required with the municipality in order to do its job to build the budget is actually what takes precedent over any of the rest of that. The protocols around engaging with the community councils and giving the opportunities for them to look at the project list and dream dreams about what's possible within their community. Those are things that should be happening at the community council level, at the federation level, with presentations and engagement from PM&E. OMB can be involved in those. The mayor's office has been involved in those conversations in the past. There are lots of opportunities, but we have to make sure people are aware of the opportunities as they exist. And one of the things I would like to see happen is that we take our current system and lift it up as high as we possibly can with the resources that we have right now, while we're incorporating some of this feedback. Some of the feedback is simple. I would argue that changing a computer system is not very simple depending on the computer system, but there are things that can be done. And so while we're working through this process, I would welcome all input and feedback, and I know that PM&E would as well. We have ways to resolve some of these issues pretty quickly. I think some of the larger issues might take more time and consideration.
Meg.
Thanks. As we talk about how we can just structure information, I'm surprised to hear myself say this, but how the tip is set up at the state level is really helpful. What it has is whether or not it was a grandfathered project. So was it one already in motion? And then it's got a short descriptor, what phase it is currently in, and then the out years planning. And then what I really love is estimated funding needs after. Right. So we know if in the time of the program, it's not going to be complete and it will need additional funds, and then an estimated cost of the overall program for the span. So for like the CIB, but then the total project cost. Right. So there's what we programmed in the time and then the ultimate program or project costs. And the reason I raise this is it's right now really hard to take our CIB documents and compare them to the TIP and try to align for purposes of rating and leveraging funding. So I find that particular format really nice. I find that particular format really nice when working with constituents because I can bring them to it. I can show them. There's a little bit of jargon and acronyms in here, so it could be just a tiny bit better. But it is a format that I think conveys a lot of information in a condensed way. So I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Anyone else? So I don't have more. I don't want to just talk to talk. I guess, Ona, you're off the hook at this point because we don't have more content, but the hook is coming one way or the other. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn and be back for our meeting at, I think it's 2:10. Thank you, everybody.